Hello and welcome to the Vintage Super League week number 2. I'm Randy Bueller. I'm joined here by Luis Scott Vargas, and we are getting ready for the match between David Williams and Chris Pikula. What are you looking for in this matchup, Luis? How do you think it plays out?
I would expect Merfolk to have an edge here, partially because True Name Nemesis and just any board presence in general is kind of hard for stacks to deal with. Or I guess Terra Nova. I apparently upset some vintage stalwarts by calling it stacks, but I just can't not call a workshop deck stacks. It's really hard for me to do anything other than that.
Fair,
But
yeah. I try to say shops and then only use stacks when I mean it, but
I mean, I do understand that there's no actual smokestacks in the deck.
still a stacks deck. It's like an
Yeah.
affinity list with no affinity cards, right? It's still an affinity deck.
Exactly. See, that was what I brought up last week, in response to that. But both decks are no rod decks, which is pretty funny. I don't think Dave is really on the mana denial plan, though. Sometimes Merfolk can actually wasteland out stacks and actually have it work. So that is kind of interesting. I've definitely seen, the shop deck go shop lock piece, then get wastelanded and not actually be able to cast its own spells.
Yeah.
But given that both players are casting spells, the Merfolk deck, I think, is just going to win. So obviously, Chris's plan is to lock Dave out, but Dave is a lot less vulnerable to that. He has a ton of basics. He even has like a lot of just cheap creatures to put on the board, which is very good against these decks.
Yeah, no, you and I were watching Chris's match last week when we did not have the deck list and saw that, his workshop deck, and there you see Mitch's workshop, that's certainly the card he wants to be playing on turn 1.
Yeah,
but yeah, his shop list it's been called the Terra Nova list. It's got a lot of creature lands in it. It is a bit idiosyncratic as workshop decks go.
Yeah, and Sphere of Resistance is a good one here. I mean, Dave didn't have a Mox, and so turn 2, he's just not going to be able to play a 2-drop. It is funny that one interaction is that Chris has 3 Chalice of the Void, but Dave has 4 Cavernous Souls, so he can actually just ignore Chalice some amount of time when he's casting his Merfolk. So.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages of the Merfolk deck, again, in the Shops matchup in particular. Cavernous Souls means the Chalice doesn't stop your stuff, and so many of your cards are creatures that Thorn of Amethyst doesn't slow you down either.
Yeah,
so Sphere is really the one lock piece that actually does what it's supposed to do. And it looks like Dave's tanking with it on the stack.
He might force it. If his hand is like force a blue card and then a Merfolk to play on turn 2 in another land, it's very reasonable to just force that here and just get something out. I mean, Chris does not have a ton of things that affect the board once they're in play. I mean, he has creatures he can play, but he can't stop Dave from accumulating lords if Dave's able to cast all his spells.
Well, Sphere of Resistance has in fact resolved, so there will not be a turn 2 lord from Dave Williams.
This is an interesting spot, too, where if Dave has a Wasteland and wastes Mishra's Workshop, he could actually end up in pretty good shape here.
Yeah, Wasteland would be nice here.
I think I like Dave's play. If he still, let's say he does have the Force, right? Because it's more interesting to talk about. If he does have the Force, I actually think waiting a turn here, letting Sphere resolve, and then forcing Chris's next play, and then going land number 3 guy, ends up being better because the Sphere doesn't actually affect Dave once he hits 3 mana, essentially. I mean, it stops True Name Nemesis only at that point.
So
I think if Dave has multiple lands to play, which it looks like he does, letting the Sphere resolve is going to be better overall. You'd much rather just force a Lodestone Golem or, whatever else comes out next. Lodestone Golem is one of Chris's better cards here because, I mean, the Thorns don't do anything. Revoker's really unimpressive. Metamorph has nothing to copy. Dismember's at least decent. He does actually have Dismember, so actually he does have a way to disrupt Dave. But Dismember with Sphere out against a Curse Catcher is actually kind of awkward because you can't use Workshop to pay for it.
Yeah, there's not a ton of lands in Dave's deck. I think he's only got 19 or 20. Now, the fact that they're basics certainly helps.
Yeah, I mean, they're Wasteland proof. And, I mean, Dave's spell lands like Wasteland and Cavern are both pretty live here.
Interesting.
Again, if Dave has a Force, he might force this. But if he just has lands to play, I mean, he's playing a land-light deck. But if he has lands to play, I could see still just wanting to play lands. It looks like he is going to go for it here. Pitching the True Name Nemesis even.
It's expensive, right? It's already a 4-mana card.
Yeah, I mean, and if the Sphere resolves, obviously, like it becomes a 5-mana card, which is essentially uncastable here.
Well,
I do like that Chris has a lot of manland in this matchup. I mean, they're just much more relevant than land, like a stacks deck that's playing like say colored spells. Not that they really do that anymore, but like having Mishra's Factor to block is actually just comes up, especially since Island Walk is not a factor.
Well, there's the Cavern. So he did have the 3 lands. Makes a lot of sense then. Let the first Sphere resolve, just like you were saying. Now he can go to 3 mana, start playing his lords, not really care about the Sphere.
Yeah, I mean, the second one might have been too much. If Dave didn't have a fourth land, especially if his third land was wastelandable, then he can't really afford to do anything else.
Does not look like he has a Lord, though.
He's attacking into Mishra's Factory.
Really?
And Chris is not blocking. Does Dave have
Dismember? He's got
Dismember?
one copy of Dismember in his list.
He's bluffing Dismember right there. I mean, that is very interesting. And then playing a no-rod to fight Chris's mana, but that's not generally as good as just playing a Merfolk here. So I kind of imagine that Dave doesn't have a Merfolk he can play.
Well, if he plays the Lord and attacks Mishra's Factory, can block, and he's not bluffing Dismember.
Yeah, so I don't think he has the Lord.
I agree with you. But, I mean, maybe he really valued Dismember bluff plus Null Rod. Wow, that Wasteland is pretty big.
Yeah, I think this is actually looking pretty good for Chris. I mean, Chris has the mana to cast his spells. It looks like he's got like the Lodestone Golem or something. Yeah, so now Dave's actually kind of locked out of playing anything, and he's about to get wastelanded, and he didn't have something to play last turn anyway.
Yeah, well, if he really does have the Dismember, then that's basically what he needs. He's got one Dismember in his list, and I think he also has one Steel Sabotage, if I'm not mistaken.
Looks like he's got one Steel Sabotage, one Dismember. Yeah, it did seem like he had the Dismember. So
yeah, so he was not bluffing last turn. He wanted Chris to activate Mishra's Factory, and Chris saw through it. Wow, and now the Wasteland from Dave.
I kind of like just wasting Mishra's Workshop here. Just go for it. I mean, yeah, that I think that's a great play. Like, you can't afford to fight over like wastelanding Chris's Wasteland. I just don't think does anything, especially if we're still operating under the assumption that Dave does not have a 3-drop Merfolk in hand. And wastelanding Mishra's Factory, I don't think as good as just trying to get a free win or at least buy a couple turns. If Chris doesn't have another multiple mana land with No Rod out and Sphere out, Chris may not be able to cast anything.
Yeah, so Dave is going to wasteland the cavern. Or sorry, Chris is going to wasteland the cavern. He played the Ancient Tomb, so he's still got. He did have the multi-mana land.
Dave no longer, I think, going to be attacking with this Curse Catcher here. And it is a multi-mana land, but it's not a workshop. Ancient Tomb's a lot worse in basically every matchup. It can activate Mishra's Factory, though. That is, I guess, a key difference. So Dave didn't have a land to play. Two cards in hand. If one of them's a forest and the other's a blue card, he's not in terrible shape. Chris also could only cast 2-drops at this point, and there's not that many 2s that are relevant here.
Yeah, wasting the cavern plus playing the Ancient Tomb essentially stalemates this board. They're kind of in a top deck battle, right? They both want to draw lands at this stage, I would think.
Yeah, Dave has more live cards, but Chris has more mana sources, I would assume. I mean, like, I do think that if Dave starts resolving Merfolk, it's just like it's a lower bar for him to just go play a third land and play a 2-drop Merfolk and then be in good shape. Right. But Chris also has a lot of cards which can set Dave back multiple turns, like another Lodestone Golem, just another Sphere of Resistance, that sort of thing. Punishes Dave a lot more because Dave is a low land count deck and 2 are already gone. And it looks like Dave gets a lot more post-board also. Though I guess Chris does get Tabernacle, which has got to be interesting here. And Batterskull.
All right, I guess we're gonna let these guys pause right here. The live stream has gone down a little bit. So this is Twitch. This isn't like the local thunderstorm, I guess. So I don't know that I want to pause super long, though. I mean, do we know? Yeah, the fact that you're recording locally makes me feel like let's just keep playing and we'll replay later. I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want
to. It has a ripple effect on all the matches.
Exactly. I mean, you're just trying to reestablish the stream and hoping it reestablishes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we can afford to stay paused very long. Just because of the ripple effect it'll have on the schedule. So we will play the replay afterwards, and people will be able to catch up with everything then.
All right, looks like we're back playing here. Is that correct?
Great. Should be.
So Chris has a second Ancient Tomb now, so he can actually cast spells. And if this is a Lodestone Golem, that's a pretty big deal.
Yes.
The two Ancient Tombs does mean that Chris can only cast a
Sting
couple
little.
more spells.
Yeah, it sounds
So
like all strings are down. But
this looks like a chalice. Given what I know about Magic Online, I think Chris is casting a chalice for 2 here, just because the mana is coming out of his pool in such a fashion.
Yeah, sure.
That's pretty good. That locks out Dave of a lot of his spells. It does mean
he
if
draws another cavern.
Yeah, he just needs to slam Cavern into Lord and be in pretty good shape here. Well, that doesn't do anything.
No. So sad when you draw the Lotus after you Null Rod and then Merfolk deck. I had that happen to me a time or two.
The old Black Lotus Null Rod combo here.
Yeah, there's 2 artifacts in the Merfolk deck other than the Null Rods. There's the Sapphire and the Black Lotus.
I like how Twitch was down last Tuesday and then was fine basically the rest of the week, and now is down again.
Yeah, it's
or at least
apparently.
Well, yeah, it looks like it might be us. I don't know, but it is just kind of funny how that all ends up. So Dave has a steady stream of Curse Catchers here, which is not going to win in the game. Chris can't really attack because he doesn't want to tap Ancient Tomb, but he's got Mischief Factory and Mutavault, so he's really in no danger here. Wasteland also means that even if Dave draws a Cavern to play a Lord, he gets to play exactly 1. So
Sure.
I think Chris is in pretty good shape here. Chris looks like he's actually going to start attacking with Mutavault, and
interesting.
The funny thing about that is Mishra's Factory can pump it because it's an assembly worker, so Dave has no blocks here. It is also funny that you can't use Mishra's Factory to pump once you activate it because of Null Rod, but when it's just in a land form, it could be used. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, you see the Terra Nova list doing what it does, attacking with mana lands.
To be fair, Dave's 1 land away from just casting a True Name Nemesis, and once he casts that, Chris is in a super fast clock. So, like the turn he casts it, Chris can't attack him with any of the mana lands. Then he knocks Chris down to 9, puts him on a 4-turn clock. Also makes tapping Ancient Tomb a lot worse. So, if Dave pitched True Name Nemesis, it's most likely because he had 2, which he I think he's had a card in his hand the whole time. I mean, so it could just be another True Name Nemesis. Like you wouldn't pitch it unless you had no other option.
If he was super land light, I would pitch it if I was light enough on land, stopping the spear. But yeah, I agree with you. He does have 2 cards in his hand for most of this game. His list does play 4 copies of True Name Nemesis.
And he had an opportunity to cast a Lord of Atlantis or maybe actually could have been Silvergill Adept. He could have just had no Merfolk to show for it.
The 5-mana Silvergill.
Yeah.
That usually gets pitched to Force of Will, though.
Yeah. And I think Dave would have pitched either Silvergill or Lord before pitching True Name. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe he keeps Lord there. He doesn't keep Silvergill there almost for sure. So
yeah, no,
I think
I might
pretty good chance. And he had an opportunity to play that Lord before the Chalice came down. So I think there's a pretty good chance Dave's got a True Name in his hand. And if he does, all he needs to do is draw any mana source here that's not, Mox Sapphire.
Right.
Looks like Dave's not hit. He could attack with Curse Catcher here. I don't think it's great, but it does force Chris to pay 2 life to Ancient Tomb, which is not completely irrelevant. Chris also doesn't have a ton of live cards at this point, so I don't think it'd be unreasonable if, that unlikely if Chris just drew bricks for a few turns. Though drawing Mutavault is pretty good here.
Yeah.
I still think that Chris is under a clock. I mean, if Dave draws a land and just plays True Name, again, that stops Chris from attacking and puts Dave, 4 attacks away from winning with Curse Catcher's back to chump with, which is pretty relevant. Dave's probably agonizing over how much he's missing now. He's just drawing Lords and other things that can stop my Chalice.
4 cards now. Wow, second Wasteland.
Well, now things are getting dicey. Now Dave has like 1 turn, and even then, Dave might actually have to stop attacking. Play True Name and not attack. Though if he plays a True Name, Chris doesn't have great attacks either, so... Dave basically has 3 Lotus Petals left in his deck. The caverns that can force through 1 Merfolk before getting wastelanded.
I thought about playing Lotus Petal in this list. Not what you mean, but
Yeah. No land. That's going to be tough
needed
for
right
Dave.
there. Yeah, now Mutavault's Factory might start getting fired up soon. Just hit 2 Mutavaults here.
The 2 Mutavaults are already lethal with the threat of the factory.
Oh, the threat of the factory, sure.
So you don't want Dave to have a profitable double block.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think Dave is pretty dead. He can block. I guess blocking 1 on each is probably the best, because then you don't take any damage this turn, and then next turn you can play True Name. I mean, your natural inclination is just to block 1 of them to chump the least possible, but I think the double block is actually best. Because then you play True Name, then you go to 1 off the attack next turn if Chris attacks with everything, and then you're not dead.
But all of this requires a land right now. What is Revoker? Revoker just gets countered by Chalice?
Yeah, Chris does take 4 though, so that's.
Why did he just forget about his Chalice for a second?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I don't think it's actually going to affect this game. But if Dave draws a True Name, that's 4 damage could technically matter. I don't know.
Oops.
And there's the land.
And there's the True Name. Wow.
I mean, Dave's still in a lot of trouble here. But Chris can't. I guess Chris can just attack with all 3 manlands. Dave blocks 1, goes to 1, and then dies next turn. So Dave needs to draw Wasteland and have another play next turn.
Yeah, that sounds right.
If Dave drew that land any of the previous 4 turns, I think he would have won this game, or at least not won this game necessarily, but he would have been in good shape. Now he's definitely losing unless he draws, I think, just Wasteland. Or maybe he could actually, I guess, play another Curse Catcher, then steal Sabotage to bounce one of the attackers.
Chris is going to have to tap an Ancient Tomb to fire up those three lands.
Actually, that's not true. Sorry. Dave blocks 1 and kills 1, goes to 1. So if Dave has a second True Name, that's what he needs. And if Chris has to tap Ancient Tomb and Dave has a second True Name, he's all of a sudden on a 1-turn clock here.
Yep. What is Chris supposed to do, though? Not attack?
No, I think Chris attacks here. Because, well, if he doesn't have a land, let's say, then he just straight up loses to the second True Name. So I'm going to assume he doesn't have a land, because otherwise the decision would be pretty easy. But if you don't attack here and then Dave plays a second True Name and attacks you on a 5, you're still just dead. So I think you just attack and hope Dave doesn't have another True Name.
Yeah, you're dead to the second True Name, period, the end. I mean, only because of the 4 Ancient Tomb damage, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true.
But okay, whatever. Sunk cost at this point.
Well, you just have to play the game as is.
At this point, you're dead to a second True Name. You have to assume he does not have a second True Name. Tap the Ancient Tomb, fire up Mutavault Mistress Factory, and put him at 1, right?
Yeah, and if Chris has another land, again, I think it's a pretty easy choice, so I'm going to assume he doesn't. Chris also could play like a Lodestone Golem. Let's see, what does that do? You just cast Lodestone Golem, tapping all your man lands. Then Dave attacks you to 5, plays a True Name. So Dave can't actually attack, even if he has a second True Name, if you play a Lodestone this turn. So, because Chris has a lot more castable spells in his deck right now. Dave's 2s are all cut off, and Dave already pitched 1 True Name. So it's possible that Chris, if he can just play a guy, could be in okay shape. But I think if he had a Lodestone, he would have played it earlier to stop True Name from coming out. So I'm just going to go into the assumption that he just doesn't have a Lodestone. He maybe drew 1 this turn. Chris still pretty deep in the tank here.
It's a tricky turn.
Dave making sure that it was on Chris and it wasn't Magic Online. But that's the thing about playing online. It's not even just because it's not Magic Online's fault in any way. When you're playing against a live person, you can see that they're thinking and they're there. When you're playing online and your opponent doesn't do anything for 6 minutes, like they could just be gone. They could be in the tank. They could be doing who knows what. So Dave is actually verifying that there's a human being trying to make a decision here, which there is. I mean, Chris is just in a tough spot here. I think he's got some interesting plays to make.
going to go Mutavault, Mutavault?
So
Really?
this isn't actually bad because he blocks
Oh,
and then
you can pump up the unblocked one to deal
Yeah.
3 damage and put him on 2?
yeah, this is actually a way better play. So,
Oh, yeah, it is. He doesn't have to tap the Ancient Tomb, but he still gets lethal next turn, assuming no second true name. And now he doesn't lose on the spot to a second true name either.
Yeah, I think Chris is in trouble if David does have a second true name, but yeah, this is very clearly the best play.
Nice
The,
line.
the one that we should have speculated about, but
Yeah, no, that's a nice line. He found a better line than we did.
Yep. So Dave's incredibly live draws are Cavern and Wasteland. His
And true name.
And true name. If he has a true name, then like if he goes true name Wasteland, it's gonna be hard for him to lose. If he's attacking here, he's got to have Wasteland. Okay, he's not attacking.
Not attacking.
He's passing. So Dave's dead unless he has exactly Steel Sabotage.
And there's one of that in his list. He's already gone through the one Dismember, which wouldn't really help here anyway.
All right, Chris is just going for it, it looks like.
Yeah. What else is he going to do? There's one card in the list he loses to. Got it?
And he doesn't actually lose.
Yeah,
it's not good for him, but he doesn't lose.
There's only one card in Dave's list that lets him survive the turn. He does not have it. Wow. That was kind of a cool game.
Yeah, that was. I'm sure Chris is glad that those 4 damage didn't actually do anything.
Indeed. Yeah, definitely.
So I'm assuming Chris is boarding in Tabernacles, Dismember, and Batterskull. I'm not 100% because I haven't played, Terra Nova. Those seem good. Tabernacle stops Dave from playing additional cards. Like it restricts his and also Chris just has cards like in his deck like Thorn, even Null Rod. They're just not good. He's got enough cards to board out, it looks like. Revoker's also not good at all, I don't think. I mean, I guess
it blocks.
It's a play, but that's about all it is.
Yeah.
And then Dave looks like he's boarding in, well, a bunch of Steel Sabotages and Dismembers, so and a Hurkyl's Recall, and maybe an Echoing Truth. So Dave actually has a pretty deep sideboard here.
Yeah, Dave has 3 copies of Steel Sabotage. He's got 3 more Dismembers. He can actually go up to the full set there. He's got a Hurkyl's Recall, which is usually the best card you can have in this matchup. He's got an Echoing Truth as well that might come in.
Yep, and I think that all of those are pretty reasonable. Dave does have I think cards like Curse Catcher in his main deck. Also, it's funny they're both playing Null Rods. I could see them both just siding out all the Null Rods. Like they're better in Dave's deck than Chris's, but neither player really wants them all that much. Also, Mental Misstep is just horrendous, so Dave will be happy.
Missteps are an easy cut. Yep. Missteps, they counter like the Soul Ring, and that's about it.
And the Soul Ring is not a particularly great card here.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how Mental Misstep lines up with a format where it's tremendous against everybody, except it's approximately dead against any workshop deck. Just kind of
one of the yeah, I don't love what Mental Misstep does in general, but I do think it is interesting that it's completely dead in this, and actually the Dredge matchup is not great. So
yeah, I mean, it's not awful. Like often on the Dredge side, I mean, I played a little bit of Dredge lately, and I kind of want to see your hand with my Cabal Therapy. I mean, when all I do is run it into a Mental Misstep, I feel like I'm down so much information, and now I have to go find another one. It's not great, but countering their Cabal Therapy is, I mean, they cast so few spells that it does counter one of the 2 only spells they cast.
Yeah, so I guess against Dredge it's not all that bad. Also, they have their own missteps. I've found that having misstep to counter misstep is actually fine because you usually have more dead cards in your deck.
Right. All right, I think game 2 might be up.
It looks like it.
Awesome.
And it looks like Dave has already kept his 7, and Chris is deciding on that. So, Mox Sapphire. I mean, getting to play a 2-drop on turn 1 is pretty big.
So good. I'm not sure there's any deck in the format that likes Mox Sapphire more on turn 1. And now, after all that setup, he does nothing.
He's got to have True Name to keep this. Right? Or like something like double Steel Sabotage. I mean, if he has Steel Sabotage and a True Name, that's just very good for him.
Yeah, I'm like, how many hands can you keep that don't do anything with 2 mana?
Well, like I said, not very many, but if you have, Disruption and True Name Nemesis, I mean, that's basically what you're looking at. I have to assume this is going to get countered in some form.
Wow,
Okay.
Force of Will pitching
Curse
Curse Catcher.
Dave didn't play Curse Catcher turn 1 because it's so bad, but it can pitch to Force, which lets him play a turn 2 True Name.
It's got to be the line, right? Otherwise, you mulligan this hand.
Yeah, I mean, this has to be a
There you
True
go. True Name Nemesis.
That is going to be tough. I don't know how Chris really deals with that besides trying to race it with like a quick Lodestone Golem or something,
It
or a
seems
Batter Skull.
awfully fast to race.
But even Batter Skull,
on play.
Yeah, the True Name just negates the Batter Skull, right? It can just sit back and block it.
Uh-huh.
No, Lodestone Golem does something. Dave seems like he gets a lot more post board. Getting 3 Steel Sabotage and a Hurkyl's Recall and Echoing Truth and Dismembers all seem like they do a lot more than what Chris gets. Like imagine a Tabernacle, Dave would just pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, there's the Lord. Wow, and a Wasteland.
Yeah, I like wasting the Ancient Tomb here. Mission's Factory is just not like being activated is just not gonna do all that much, and making it so Chris can't cast another Lodestone or a Batter Skull without like having a Mishra's Workshop is pretty big.
Yeah, the question is whether you attack with True Name or not.
Oh, I think for sure you slam. You're already like, the half turn ahead because you get to attack first, and you're just a more aggressive deck in general. And Dave presumably is going to get to cast more spells. I guess he only has 1 card in his hand, so even if Dave has nothing else, I think he's still better off attacking here. Chris also has more cards in hand, so sitting back and letting Chris like leverage the extra spells he has does not seem like it would work out very well.
Yeah, Dismember takes out Master. Lodestone Golem gets to attack without even a chump block available.
Yeah, and I mean you have to Dismember to Master because it represents 3 damage already, but paying 4 life to do that doesn't really help, the winning the race cause here. Oh man.
Oh jeez. Null Rod shutting off both of Chris's Moxen.
Yeah, it is better in Dave's deck, and it looks like he didn't have enough cards to take out, or he wants to keep 1 or 2 Null Rods. I can't imagine he kept all of them.
Yeah, I think you shave there. I don't think you cut them all. I think you shave.
For a situation like this, Chris basically can't cast spells or disrupt True Name here, barring, like a Mishra's Workshop.
Yeah, technically, I think he wins this race, but...
Yeah, but the thing is, it's all under Dave's control. Dave could just not attack, and then Chris can't attack. And if Dave draws anything that he can cast, like a land to cast a random 2-drop, he's just going to be able to win. Whereas Chris is a lot farther away from casting spells.
But you see, Dave did feel like he needed to block.
Yeah, I think especially given the Mishra's Factory sitting there, that if Chris draws a land, he can activate it. That makes sense. But I still think Dave's kind of in control here. I mean, Chris could just draw a Workshop and start casting spells, I suppose. But Dave looks like just 1 land away. There's no sphere besides Lodestone in play. This Mox Jet's not going to do a whole lot. Also, Dave could just draw Steel Sabotage, end of turn, bounce Lodestone, and then Chris can't recast it and can't attack. So Dave's got a lot of very strong cards to draw here.
Right.
I assume some number of them are just lands too. Like if he draws lands, Dismembers, or Steel Sabotages, he's in very good shape. Sphere is good though. Sphere is gonna, actually put Dave into a kind of tough spot. Like, I mean, Dave still has a lot of time because an untapped True Name is really hard for Chris to get around. But having Dave essentially on 0 lands in terms of castable spells here is pretty important. I wonder if Dave is considering forcing this, because if he had a Steel Sabotage, I think you just bounce Lodestone Golem in response.
Right. Totally.
Like you don't actually care too much. Looks like a force though. Oh, that's brutal. He had to pitch Time Walk. If he had drawn a land and could have attacked with True Name and then Time Walk, that would have been pretty awesome. But I think Dave has to stop Sphere from resolving there, because Dave's already, locked out of casting. Like he obviously would have cast Time Walk if he was able to.
The stalemate continues. Wasteland, not irrelevant.
No, definitely not. Especially if Chris has just a parade of spheres here. Dave might be in a lot of trouble. I thought things were looking pretty good for Dave because he was 1 land away from basically winning the game, but now every turn that passes, it gets less and less likely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he drew a land a turn too late, which has been kind of the story of this match, but that is kind of how playing on stacks feels like. Like it all feels like you're under the gun, and if you can draw a land, you can cast your spells, and if you resolve a spell, you can win. But all the deck's trying to do is stop you from resolving spells. And there's the Mitchell's Workshop. So, yeah, this is actually Chris is kind of rolling here. I think he's gonna just keep playing spheres.
Wow.
Chris actually has
lethal next turn, right?
He needs, I guess, nothing. I mean, he can just activate Mutavault, attack, pump it with Factory, and attack with 2 Lodestones. So Dave needs to draw a Steel Sabotage or a land to cast like a Hurkyl's Recall or a 2-drop. No, I guess he can't even do that. Dave can't cast anything because of the 3 spheres. So Dave's actually just dead here.
Wow. Terra Nova Shops, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, he's tearing it up.
He's gonna win through True Name in both games.
Yeah, that's impressive. I did not think that the deck could do that easily. And I mean, granted, Dave did not cast another.
Oh, there's the Darksteel Juggernaut for the Robins.
He could have just attacked for lethal, which would have probably.
But then he wouldn't have gotten to play Darksteel Juggernaut.
Yeah, I understand. I can appreciate that.
Power. I was wondering what this card does. Power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control and must attack and indestructible. Hilarious.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Activating Mishra's Factory makes it lethal all by itself. Dave's like, no, not going to let you attack. I'm not going to kill my Darksteel Juggernaut.
Yep.
To win. That's funny. Wow. Chris Pikula moves to 2-0 with Terra Nova Shops. David Williams on the other side falls to 0-2 with his Merfolk deck. You'll forgive me if I hope that doesn't signal a trend for today's Merfolk decks.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, Luis and I are in fact paired in the third match today, and I am, of course, piloting a similar Merfolk deck, although one with a little bit more land in it, for whatever that's worth.
And it looks like you've got Chris to do commentary on Ifro against Bob this round.
Yeah, so I certainly appreciate you hanging out. I'm sure we'll get you back in the booth, but I will meet you in Magic Online one match from now.
Sounds good.
Later. All right, we'll be right back.